Italian cuisine and so on. And I say, actually, yes, because it insults us in our deepest integrity by saying that we wouldn't know where right and wrong came from if it wasn't for divine permission. And we wouldn't have a meaning to life if it wasn't by supernatural determination. In other words, that we would be like the inhabitants of someone like North Korea or Iran, children of an intolerant and greedy and narrow-minded deity. So yes, that would spoil everything. But by the way, chess is banned in Iran, where they can ban it. Because the whole point about totalitarianism is it abolishes the private life and any private recreation. So yes, I do mean it seriously. But now, for example, my daughter goes to a Quaker school. Do I really say that the Quakers are the same? Well, they make the same mistake, which is that they think that faith is a word that deserves approbation. If I could change one thing about the discourse in this country, just one, it would be we would stop nodding approvingly when people say, I'm a person of faith. Because what are you nodding at? The guy who you know is a glib asshole for saying it in the first place would, even if he was a sincere asshole, would be saying, I hope you like the fact that I'm willing to take an enormous amount of very important stuff completely on trust without any evidence of any kind. I say, I'm not going to admire that. I think that stinks. So, and I'm afraid the Quakers are just as guilty of saying that faith is a good thing, whereas in fact it's the most overrated of the virtues, if it's a virtue at all.
This may or may not be a related question. Have you ever hiked the Appalachian Trail or been to Argentina?
Argentina I've done, and there's a very odd bit of the Appalachian Trail near the Housatonic River in Connecticut, where I had a brief stroll on the 4th of July 1977 until the mood for exercise left me again. But Argentina changed my life. Well, I was there during what's now called historically the Dirty War, the period where the death squads, the Escuadrones de la Muerte, were roaming the streets of Buenos Aires and picking people up, and the word desaparecido came into our language, the disappeared, using the disappeared as a verb. He's been disappeared, or she's been disappeared. And watching that and interviewing some of the people who'd been victims of it and then meeting some of the people who'd been doing it was a huge thing for me. And well, when you say, why did it change my life? Well, the article I wrote about it for the New Statesman, my old socialist journal in London, made Victor Navarsky of The Nation write to me and say, did I want to have a job at The Nation in New York? And I said, yes. So it changed my life in that way, and then the other way it changed my life was when Mrs. Thatcher sent a fleet to bombard and overthrow these scumbags. I was on her side, which I never expected to be. But where would history be without ironies, and why would it be worth studying?
Well, speaking of history, you've written a pretty compelling article recently calling for the return of the Elgin marbles.
Elgin.
Elgin marbles.
They're not Tanqueray. They're not even Gordon's. Now you'll remember.
We'll get some other questions about drink later. So do you think it'll happen in your lifetime?
Yes. I'm sure it will. Now, the other day, not of course because, but just the Guardian newspaper in London, very well read paper, one of the last not to have gone tabloid, had a poll. It very much surprised me. It was almost Saddam Hussein-like. Should they go back to Athens or not? 97% said yes. I was surprised by that. I knew the majority had been going up. For most people, the argument's completely over, for the obvious reason that if, say, the panel of the Mona Lisa had been sawn in half during the Napoleonic Wars, which it could easily have been, many artworks were, and one bit of it was in St. Petersburg, say, and one in Lisbon, there'd be a very big demand, I think, now, to see what they'd look like if they were put together. Well, this applies immeasurably more intensely to the sculpture of Phidias, which is an architectural narrative and a poetic one rendered in marble with figures interacting with each other and telling a story. It makes no sense at all that this should be amputated or partitioned, and the other half imprisoned in a colonial museum in Bloomsbury.
We have a number of questions, curiously enough, about your favorite things. One wants to know things you can't live without when traveling, and one person, one well-informed audience member, of course, wants to know what your favorite whiskey is.
Well, I don't see what the difference between the two questions. The best blended Scotch in the history of the world, which was also the favorite drink of the Iraqi Ba'ath Party, as it is still of the Palestinian Authority, and the Libyan dictatorship, and large branches of the Saudi Arabian royal family, Johnny Walker Black. Breakfast of champions, except no substitutes.
Well, here's a question about religion again, about religion and climate change. How do you see religion affecting or being affected by climate change?
Well, I've noticed that the more flooding there is, the more bullshit gets taught. I mean, it was very noticeable in the Asian tsunami. Sri Lanka, which is a country I know a little bit and care about, everyone said, it happened, as you remember, around Christmas, New Year. The Buddhists said, we knew this would happen because of the horrible Muslim slaughter practices. So it was amazing to see how apocalypse or catastrophe makes people behave primitively. The same happens with earthquakes. It will happen when the next big earthquake hits Iran. It'll be very interesting to see, because it's coming like Christmas, that earthquake, by the way. It's coming like a heart attack. Whether the government gets blamed for spending all its resources on nuclear weapons and building underground bunkers. By the way, those nukes will be in underground bunkers when the earthquake hits, just the place where you want them to be. Or whether people will say it's because we haven't been sufficient in our devotions to Allah. But there will be those rival schools. There were British bishops in the later flooding in London who said that it was because Tony Blair had legalized homosexuality. This kind of cretinism is incurable. But unfortunately, for those of us who take the warming threat seriously, that means we're going to have to put up with more of it as there's more inundation.
Well, at least for this evening, we're out of time.
Too much.
So thank you very much, Christopher Hitchens.
Thanks for having me.